Welcome, everyone, to our third meeting of the Disability Advisory Committee. I would like to start by introducing Michael Karowitz, Special Counsel to the Chairman, and I will turn it over to him for his comments.
Thank you. Good morning. On behalf of Chairman Pai and the Commission, I'd like to say welcome. For those of you who traveled from outside of Washington to be here, you're here at one of the most beautiful times for Washington. You may have been here in springtime before, but the cherry blossoms are out, the trees are flowering, lots of magnolia trees. When I was walking to work this morning, caught my eye. Together, we are committed to ensuring that persons with disabilities have equal access to 21st century telecommunications products and services. That is the Commission, but that is also all of you. We very much have a partnership here that we in the Commission take very seriously. As Chairman Pai observed at the conclusion of the second term of the DAC, we take our commitment seriously, and this new and third term of the DAC, like its predecessors, are going to play a key role in that effort. And indeed, if the first 4 years of the DAC are any indication, your two-year term will produce recommendations for the Commission that will be instrumental in addressing a whole lot of issues. The accessibility issues associated with wireless and wireline platforms, interfaces, and services that will ensure that persons with disabilities are empowered and enabled at home, at work, and in all other facets of American life. We are really excited about what you as a team will produce by the time your term is up down the line. So there's a lot of space between now and then, and I think it's going to be a pleasure working together during that time. As most of you know, the Commission has been making steady progress in a number of vital accessibility areas over the past year. For example, just 2 days ago, new rules took effect that we adopted in February to improve IP-CTS. Enhancing the efficiency of the program, particularly through the support of IP-enabled relay services, ensures that the latest innovations in relay services are readily available to all who need them. Also, in February, the Commission's Media Bureau released a public notice seeking comment on recent developments in the video description market. And this will enable the Commission to make its second and final report to Congress as required by the 21st Century Communications and Video Accessibility Act of 2010, and that's the Cvaa, on the availability, the use, the benefits, and the cost of video description later this year. This report is a first step toward the potential extension of our video description accessibility rules to designated market areas currently out of scope for the rules, and thereby ensuring access for the blind and visually impaired in those markets to video programming. And these are just a couple of the items that I wanted to highlight here. There are many more from the past 4 years, including hearing aid compatibility, video programming, and captioning and IP-enabled video, ensuring accessibility, ensuring accessible user interfaces and set-top box controls, menus and program guides, and emergency communications access. But I think the key point in all of these examples is the Commission has directly benefited from the input and recommendations of this advisory committee, and by extension, so have consumers and the industry as a whole. I'm really looking forward to working with you in the time ahead. Invite you to call on me when you happen to be in Washington for conversations, and hopefully get to know each of you a little bit better. So I wanted to give you my best wishes for another productive meeting and to thank you all for what you do here.
Thank you, Michael, for your comments and for your time. And now I'm going to turn it over to Will Schell, our designated federal officer.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, thank you, Michael. That's exciting things coming up. And before we get into any more of the meeting, I wanted to go through the kind of traditional housekeeping. Housekeeping, that's what it is. So, as many of you already know, this information, I'll make it very quick. This meeting is open to the public. There is a live webcast of this being broadcast on fcc.gov/live. And if you are watching on the livecast or webcast, or if you're here in the audience, there will be a time for public comments. And the public comments can be sent into live questions at fcc.gov. That's all one word, live questions with an S at fcc.gov. We will review those towards the end of the agenda. And then also there is a public microphone stand in the back of the room, and during the public comment time, members of the public can come and give a comment. If you would like to connect to the Wi-Fi in here, the Wi-Fi password is FCC, all capitals, FCC 823302. It's also posted on the pillars and around. The communication needs in this room can be quite complex, so we have a series of requests for communicating. In order to be called upon, you can raise your card up. That is a really good way to signal that you'd like to be called upon. You can also raise your hand. The chair will be calling on people, Isidore, and when you are being called upon, you should wait for the microphone to be working, because we really want the CART system and the captioning system to be able to pick up what you're saying. Or if you're signing, please wait for the video to get on you so that everyone can see what you're saying. Also, try to identify yourself when you are first speaking. I don't recall if I said that this is Will, but this is Will Shell, the designated federal officer for this meeting. And also, please, only one person at a time. Just for the logistics purposes, bathrooms are out the exits from this room. There's 2 exits. If you exit the door on the left-hand side of the room, you cross the hall, take a right, follow the wall to the left, and then follow it to the left again. And the first door is the men's, and the second door is the women's. And then if you leave this first door, just cross the hall, follow the wall to your left, take a left, and you're at the bathrooms there. And then also, I just want to say thank you to the FCC staff who have been doing a bunch of behind-the-scenes work. So, of course, April and many other staff members at the Disability Rights Office have been doing a bunch of running around and getting names cards printed and getting signs made, food set up. And that brings me to just the food. I just want to start off by saying that the food, the refreshments, they're sponsored by T-Mobile. Shelly Blankley is here. Sorry if I messed that up, Shelly. Thank you so much. It's a big help, and we all really appreciate it. And then one last thing for housekeeping is at lunch who can eat lunch. This meeting is open to the public, but the lunch is not open to the public. So anyone who's sitting at this table can eat lunch. Also, any alternates or anyone providing assistance, like the interpreters, and can also eat lunch. If you have a question about whether you can eat lunch, please please feel free to ask. But pretty much anyone involved with the membership of the Disability Advisory Committee or anyone providing assistance can certainly eat lunch. And let me also just say thank you to the interpreters for setting up such a large, complex system, and the CMR staff who's doing the videos and the microphones, and then also the captioning service who's trying to get us all down, get all the words in the right place. So thanks to all of those people.
Great, thank you, Will. So I'm not sure if he's here.
Oh,
I would like to introduce Commissioner O'Reilly and welcome him to make his remarks.
Well, all righty, that's about the shortest introduction I've ever heard. It's awful quiet in here. I walked in, oh my goodness, you people, what's going on? It's nice and sunny out there. I just got in at 11:30 last night from Vegas, so I'm happy to be back at home. Look, I want to appreciate the opportunity to speak with you this morning and share a few thoughts as you head into a long morning of introductions and examining some of the foundational elements of the committee, which will eventually get you to your new work on important communication disability-related topics. At the outset, let me take the opportunity to thank you in advance for your willingness to serve on one of our advisory committees. I realize this role will take you away from your family and other responsibilities, and the Commission is very appreciative. For returning committee veterans, thanks for signing up to another round of pain and aggravation. For newbies, forget you heard that at all, and the work is all about rainbows and sunshine. When I think of FCC advisory committees, I'm reminded of two quotes. First, in the fall of 1774 and the winter of 1775, I was one of upwards of 30, chiefly mechanics, who framed ourselves into a committee for the purpose of watching the movements of the British soldiers and gaining every intelligence of their movement of the Tories. That's Paul Revere. The second is by Arthur Goldberg, the famous American judge, who was quoted as saying, if Columbus had an advisory committee, he would probably still be on the dock. As I see it, your goal should be to land somewhere between these two visions. As Americans, we maintain certain obligations, some driven by law and others by our inherent morals, to help those mentally and physically challenged in our nation. These individuals are our brothers and sisters, mothers and fathers, sons and daughters. They are our neighbors and friends. Their burdens are our burdens, and their care is part of our societal responsibility. Our role is to ensure they have the greatest opportunity possible to flourish in society, gain lawful employment, and pursue their own happiness to the fullest extent. The Commission has been at the forefront of helping to improve the lives of those who face certain challenges by facilitating the development of new communications technologies for their use. We have long supported the notion that technology truly can be the great equalizer in addressing the physical and mental limitations of those who may need a little bit more help in our society. As many of you may know, we operate and fund the availability of several technology-driven solutions to allow disabled individuals to communicate throughout our nation. Our appreciation is appropriately owed to past commissions for their foresight and commitment to this issue. But with most good intentions comes a level of problems and bureaucratic challenges. The Commission's disability spending has attracted some less reputable people who have taken advantage of our good nature and willingness to be charitable. Some have also preyed upon those within the disabled community to gain riches while delivering the empty promises, leading to waste, fraud, and abuse in the overall effort. I'm sure a higher power will catch up with those someday, but that doesn't mean that we don't do everything right now to correct these circumstances. Similarly, consider what's happening in the different disability technologies. The artificial competition the Commission tried to establish in certain programs is having difficulty surviving. Some small providers are facing a tough market in which scale matters, and the potential exit, if that were to occur, will leave one provider offering monopoly service to the disability community where it hasn't happened already. In such cases, the Commission has tended to turn to rate of return and dominant firm regulations, which leads to further problems. I've pushed for new options, such as reverse auctions, to determine support and funding levels, and I hope there's openness to these efforts among DAC members. At the same time, if you don't already realize it, the cost to American consumers for the collection of disability-related programs is growing at a fairly aggressive and unsustainable rate. It's appropriately $1.5 billion this year after being just above $1 billion 3 years ago. We simply can't carry out our overall mission for disabled individuals if the program faces runaway spending that unnecessarily will zap time and energy. Accordingly, the DAC can play an important role, and I suggest has an obligation to help the Commission contain costs. So let me share some thoughts on what the Commission and the disability community need to help us examine as we go forward. Specifically, I strongly believe that we need to move away from specialized services with proprietary equipment and towards increased use and adoption of modern communications technology to serve the most vulnerable populations. This means more use of email, text, video chat, real-time text, and the like. Substitutable services need to be employed to a greater extent in order to drive down overall costs. Many of these services, which clearly will not work for every disabled consumer, are free today and provide great means to communicate, conduct business, entertain, and the various myriad of features and functions that non-disabled individuals take for granted each day. There's a fair amount of resistance to this effort, which I've talked about many times before. One of the largest retorts by naysayers is that the law says functionally equivalent. But we must acknowledge that American consumers are moving away from voice communications. Continuing to try to make disabled communications equivalent to a passing technology makes no sense and is extremely costly. Indeed, we must embrace other options because these aren't second-rate services. It's actually a move towards use of more popular technologies to exchange and engage between citizens these days. Ask any teenager how they communicate with their friends, and the answer you get back may surprise you. Apps and certain technology dominate the scene, and these can save us valuable resources, preventing the fund from facing more draconian cuts in the future. I implore you to consider how best to move away from proprietary technologies and providers. If the DAC is able to submit recommendations along these lines, then we have a real chance to preserve our efforts to help a valuable population of Americans. I thank you for your time and the chance to share a few words with you on this fine morning. All my best for the successful rest of your day. So thank you again. I appreciate your time, and I wish you a good day. Thank you.
Sorry. Thank you. Paul Schrader with IRA. Two quick things. One, can you clarify when you say program expenses, are you referring specifically to the Relay program, or are there other disability programs that you're referring to? Secondly, given the propensity for, if we're going to go with what teenagers are doing, video and photographic and pictorial communications, what elements should the FCC consider to ensure that people who are blind have access to that form of communication?
Well, second question first. I made clear that it won't, that all technologies won't work for everyone, and it's not implied that it would. My argument on the first point is that it's not just one program; it is a number of programs, and the growth rate in IPCTS is exorbitant. And now at 1.5 and growth of 500 million in 3 years, on about what's that run? A good percentage. I'm a little tired to figure out the math right at this moment, but that's unsustainable in terms of we're having problems on USF funding in terms of we're reaching $11 billion in authorized spending. So the growth rate is really problematic, and it's just going to mean harder cuts at some point in the future. My thought is to get ahead of the curve and provide an opportunity to address certain cost containments in the front end before we get to that point.
Yeah, I wanted to, Paul Schrader again with IRA, I wanted to clarify that you weren't referring, I'm assuming, to FCC enforcement of provisions of the CVAA or of Section 255 of the 96 Act when you were talking about program expenditures getting out of control. Or were you?
Well, I'm not sure I understand your point.
I'm trying to understand what level of what programs you're actually delving into. What I've heard you talk about, what sounds like video relay and relay, but I wanted to know if you were also including FCC enforcement activities around the provisions of the Communications and Video Accessibility Act and other accessibility programs here.
I was talking globally about the cost of the entire, of all the programs that we run in this space, and at a cost of 1.5 billion, I think that's that is probably not sustainable. And so, and to your point, in terms of enforcement side, we certainly have obligations that I referenced in the beginning part, and I intend to uphold them. And certainly obligations not only in the statute but also inherent in my belief as an individual of our great nation. So I think that I intend to uphold the law. I think that there are things that we can do, and I've highlighted a couple that we need to look at closely, and I hope that DAC will take advantage of that opportunity. Moving forward, whether it be reverse auctions in some instances in some programs or cost attainments in the others, and looking at new technology. I hope that helps. Thank you. Any other questions on this? Oh, there's one over here. I don't know if someone's going to recognize.
Jeff Rosen, please make your comments.
Commissioner O'Reilly, my name is Jeff Rosen. I'm one of the relay providers. I came here today to share an interest in making sure we improve the long-term health of the relay services. I'm involved in the deaf community, and I know many generations of deaf people who need to ensure that they have the long-term health of relay services, and we really appreciate the FCC's commitment to that, to ensuring that there is no fraud, waste, or abuse in relay. But I would like to point out one thing, maybe for the purposes of understanding the big picture. One instance is where we're required to provide equipment accommodations, including people with disabilities in the workforce. For example, people in the government under the ADA. Governmental agencies all across the country have these dollars to provide these services. Public access in places of public accommodations, as well as hotels, restaurants, theaters. All of these different entities need to provide these accesses as well. And because of that, all of the deaf and hard of hearing people need to have access to many things in life, specifically 4 issues related to the telecommunications provision for those services themselves. And I don't mind if, it's AT&T, Sprint, or whoever, but they decline to do
because they find it burdensome, they have declined to step forward into this space. And so there's this central fund of money that everybody would contribute to. I understand the perception of the numbers that you're throwing out, 1.5 billion, but if we actually compare those numbers in terms of Title 1, 2, 3, it's not really out of proportion. And so my understanding, I understand where the FCC's concern is coming from. Of course, we're talking big dollars, but we also need it to be effective and efficient. And I want to make sure that we have the big picture, a really concise understanding of the entire nation. So thank you for listening to my comment.
I appreciate your comments. Just a quick response. The Commission only has so much scope, and you highlighted a number of federal agencies that have responsibilities and other things that they can do, that we can work with them, but we can't tell them. We haven't been charged with some of those obligations. To your second point, I appreciate the obligations the Commission has and with the work that we have done, but to increase $500 million in 3 years, that is incredibly significant. And that's not something that, I'm shirking in terms of saying that, put in proportion to all the money we're spending in other programs. I'm saying at that rate in any program, no matter where it is, it was $500 million in USF over a 3 years period. I'd be looking at that as well. So this is not something that's targeted towards any one entity, but at that rate, I believe that's unsustainable.
Hello. Thank you. I'm Brian Scarpelli, the other co-chair. I'll introduce myself later, but just for purposes, I think Claude with TDI has his card up next. And I apologize, I can't see your name card through the interpreter. Pamela after that. Go ahead, Claude.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Commissioner O'Reilly. Thank you for your comments and your response to Jeff. I would like to build on his comments. I encourage you to invite a number of national organizations and consumer advocacy groups to talk about these issues with you and continue to have a dialogue on these issues. I think that you have a better perspective of TRS services when you involve consumers. You mentioned that you want to emphasize that 1.5 billion. That 1.5 billion is about 2% of the total telecommunications market. And the total telecommunications market is about $66 billion. So that's about 2% of the total telecommunications market. So I want you to, of course, we have to be careful and monitor for fraud, waste, and abuse. But you mentioned that it's a $500 million increase. But that's all right. Because when we started with VRS, it's been around for about 15 years. But it's now been stable at about $400 or $500 million. And that's the same as what's been happening with IPCTS. IPCTS is growing. The products are growing. The product life cycle is growing. And we haven't yet reached that peak. Hard of hearing people are about 4 times the amount of signers. So I think that your staff really needs to incorporate consumer advocacy groups in this communication with you.
Well, I think I'm looking at a group of experts for that purpose, and now what I was asking is that we work with the DAC and that you examine some of my ideas. In the past, DACs haven't been willing to do so. But I did want to start and say, from my understanding and reading, that you may be leaving us in terms of your employment in the next couple of years, and I wish you all the best if I understand that to be accurate. Is that yes, sir?
Yes, but I'm here right now. 1 more year. I'm here for 1 more year.
As am I.
Pamela, go ahead. Thank you.
When you were speaking, you said a phrase that really, to me, hit a home run. And you said technology can be a great equalizer. Technology is a great equalizer. In the 50-plus years I've been deaf, it's technology, it's the FCC's provisions of requirements to make a difference in communications assets that has brought functionally equivalent level playing field. So I thank you for recognizing that technology can be a great equalizer.
Oh, I think we have, sorry, this is Brian Scarpelli again speaking. We have Greg. I believe you put your name card up first, and then Lisa with HLAA. After Lisa, we'll close the comments and move on.
Hello, Commissioner. I don't want to repeat the points that have already been mentioned, but I did want to mention one thing in addition. I appreciate your thoughts and your perspective on your discussion with data. I know that you're a data guy, and I know that you appreciate this is something that we are working on going forward to ensure that this program is stable and able to continue. Well, the frustrating part is that when we're looking at the issue, trying to balance that out with relay, with reality, people who can benefit from those services, people with disabilities can take advantage of these services to increase their work, to increase their life in general. There are many positives that contribute to that. And that's not factored into the data. So when talking with Claude, really he has a positive influence on the community, and this program really has a positive influence on the community. That's why he's encouraging you to talk with the consumer groups.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Go ahead.
This is not on yet. Hi, guys. Yes, okay. I can't really see you. Yes, Commissioner O'Reilly, thank you so much for coming and spending a few minutes and actually listening to what we have to say. I'm really appreciative of that. And I agree with Pam. One of the things that you said that struck me was that looking at mainstream equipment can really, it's possible we'll get to a point where people who are hard of hearing and deaf can use mainstream equipment instead of the specialized equipment. And I absolutely think that is the future. But you're looking at, I'm hard of hearing. I have a significant hearing loss. I have an IPCTS phone on my desk at work. I have one at home, so maybe I can hear my children sometimes. But the point is, I could not be working without it. I know people who know nothing, who age into hearing loss. We say there's 48 million people with hearing loss, and most of them have a milder loss, but there's a segment who are still retiring early when they age into hearing loss because they never heard of IPCTS. There are people who come to our meetings of Hearing Loss Association of America, and these are the educated people. They know nothing about IPCTS. The reasons, my understanding and my belief, truly believe, that the reasons the numbers shifted so quickly is that the people were reaching our people faster than the earlier version. So I think Gallaudet had shown that in most new products it shoots up, and then it'll plateau. And I totally expect it to plateau at some point because we are a big group of people, but we're not endless. Just like the deaf community is a closed community, it's not going to be endless, and we'll get to that point where mainstream equipment, which I'm really looking forward to, will help. but we need to reach that point. And again, HLA absolutely agrees that the FCC is providing a very good role in making sure that everybody is behaving properly. We don't want to see fraud, and we do not want to see this program end. So we want no fraud, no abuse, and if anybody has anything, I say, tell the providers, tell them where they're doing wrong. But so far, nobody has said to me, oh, these guys are really doing bad stuff. They say anecdotally, generally, oh, we're hearing this and that, but it's all gossip. I want to see data too. Somebody said you're a data person. I want to see where they're showing actual fraud and abuse, and then absolutely, I don't want this program to end. So I think it's good that the FCC is keeping everyone on their toes. I think that's great. But I want really to make sure that people can still work, that people can have access to their children and families by able to use the telephone in a way they could not have done before.
Appreciate your comments. Thank you so very much. Well, with that, I better go. My apologies. I'll wind up monopolizing the rest of your day. So thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your time. So now we will move on with Will Schell, and we will welcome and introduce our 504 compliance officer for their comments. So to discuss DAC communication protocols.
Hi, everyone. It's me again. Let me just find my notes. This is Will, and I'm super excited that the DAC is already off to really important conversations. I mean, we're already into it. It's only been 30 minutes. So congratulations to everyone here, and to the people who couldn't make it here, congratulations as well for being members of the Disability Advisory Committee. This is a federal advisory committee, and they have been around for a very long time. I understand, or I read while trying to create these remarks that George Washington had a federal advisory committee. So you guys are following in the footsteps of a long history. But then in the 1970s, Congress passed a set of rules to try to contain some of the negative parts of federal advisory committees that they were seeing. So, for example, some federal advisory committees had only industry members, just the people who would benefit from the programs, and some advisory committees lasted for over 100 years. And I'm not joking. So Congress passed the Federal Advisory Committee Act, FACA, or FACA, and FACA governs the establishment and the operation of the advisory committees. The advisory committees are formed when a federal agency needs input from experts, and you all are the experts. The disability issues can be very complex, and receiving your input on specific issues is extremely helpful. One of the rules of FACA is that there must be a designated federal officer. That's me. And that means that some federal employee who is a liaison between the advisory committee and the federal agency. trying to serve both the Federal Advisory Committee and the Federal Communications Commission. I'm responsible to ensure that the FACA requirements are met and the proper ethics requirements are met. And I am assisted by Deborah Patkin, who's the Deputy Designated Federal Officer. And she will substitute in for me if I can't make it, or if I just stop reading emails, go on vacation, things like that. Later on today, we're going to hear from Paula Sibberthau. She's from the FCC's Office of General Counsel. She will talk about FACA and the ethics requirements in more detail. A few things to keep in mind while serving on the DAC. The full committee meetings, as we've already mentioned, they're open to the public. And we have to provide ample notice to the public so that they can come and participate if they want. And all of the records from these meetings are kept and they're published on our committee website, which is fcc.gov/DAC. We keep all of the supporting documents on that site, like the charter. The DAC has a charter, and also the member list, the meeting minutes, and any of the recommendations that are passed. That website has been updated recently, and I'm pretty excited. I think it looks good. So the DAC was established back in 2014, specifically to provide advice and recommendations on issues that the FCC needs. The first term of the DAC ran from 2014 to 2016. And then many of you know that there was a second term, as many of you were in the second term. And then this most recent advisory committee started technically in 2018 and will run through 2020. And I know just from this initial conversation that we've been having, this is going to be another successful committee. But learning from the past two terms, we have made a few changes to the structure of the DAC, and I want to kind of run through that very quickly. There are no more standing subcommittees. So instead, there are working groups that are going to be formed when the DAC is assigned a new topic. The scope of the issues that we're going to be working on remains the same, and there's quite a long list of potential issues, but we are going to do fewer issues at a time. I think right now we have 2, and we are going to try to work quickly and more intensely on those particular issues at a time, rather than having multiple standing subcommittees with multiple issues at a time. So once the working group finishes working on that topic, the working group will be disbanded. And this will be beneficial in many ways. First, there can be a new chair for each issue, for each working group. And the chair of the working group doesn't have to commit to a 2-year commitment of being the chair of a working group. And then Also, some organizations were serving on up to 3 working groups, and some of previously we called them subcommittees. So some organizations were serving on 3 of those, and those on occasion were having 2 meetings a month. So there was people who were attending 6 meetings a month, working, subcommittee meetings in order to keep up with all of those things. With this new structure, there should be fewer meetings, but hopefully they will be more focused on a particular topic. We're going to try to work through these 2 issues. We're gonna try to push along and hopefully get results. And will expedite the production of recommendations. We'll see. On occasion, a few organizations will not be on a working group. So there will be some times when you are not assigned to an issue that has nothing to say about your particular organization, other than the working group is either full, there's a limit on the amount of people that can be in the working group, or your organization maybe is not best suited to be on that particular working group. Although I have made mistakes in the past, so if you're not on a working group, you can always reach out. We can see what we can do. Right now, the 2 working groups are totally full, and there's actually very few people who aren't on a working group. So the working groups themselves, as we get assigned issues, we'll formulate a new working group. Those working groups have to have a balance of members, right? And most of the time, the working groups will meet remotely via video conference and by phone. Each meeting must have a federal facilitator, and so you'll be assigned someone from the FCC to facilitate the meeting. The 2 working groups that are going right now, that we're going to be having meetings after this meeting is over, or after lunch. One is focusing on audio description issues, and one is focusing on real-time text issues. The working groups will discuss the issues and, if possible, send recommendations to this full DAC for a vote. If you are not on one of the working groups, you are still a member of the full DAC, and as the recommendations come in, there will be discussion here, and you will be voting on whether or not the whole DAC agrees with the recommendation. So like I said, the working groups will meet right after lunch. There'll be more information about that at the end of the meeting, but those meetings will be closed to the public. Those will be closed meetings as per the FACA rules. So let me just see if there's any questions that people have right now about that kind of thing, and then I'll hand it over to Gerard. Questions? Awesome. I nailed it. So let me hand this over to Gerard Williams, who is the FCC's Section 504 compliance officer, to give us some best practices to optimize our communications and accessibilities during these meetings.
Good morning, this is Gerard. I am the FCC Section 504 Compliance Officer. As Will Shell stated, I know many of you. Even those of you who don't know me, you may recognize my voice, you may recognize my face. As the sign language interpreters at the FCC, we are very visible and yet sometimes unknown. So I want to take a moment to introduce the interpreters briefly here. Of course, myself, we also have Lindsay Snyder, who is one of our federal staff interpreters. She is working right now now, as they all are. We also have Amy Cressup, who is one of our federal staff interpreters, and we have 2 contract interpreters working with us today, Julie Bagshaw and Sarah Blattberg. Just wanted to make sure to thank them, and if you have an opportunity to thank them during the day, they do a lot of hard work to make sure that these meetings run very smoothly. We'll also mention the AV staff here in the CMR who are outstanding. Specifically want to thank Steve and Greg for all the work that they're doing, making sure that any of the 100 microphones are on at the right time and that the camera can be moved 360 degrees and zoomed in appropriately at just the right moment. And they are really expert at that, so I appreciate all the work that they do there as well. Some of you have served on previous DACs, so you may be familiar with my song and dance. I will try to keep it relatively short. I strongly believe that accommodations do not mean accessibility. We like to have this talk at the beginning of a DAC meeting so that we can set ourselves in the right mindset. Accessibility truly requires our vigilance, and so we have to constantly remind ourselves and ask ourselves, is the way that I am behaving right now, is what I am doing, is it interfering with accessibility, is it improving accessibility, or at the very least, leaving the accessibility alone, neither improving or worsening it. In a happy accident, Will, as I understand it, printed out 28 copies of these beautiful name tents that everyone has in front of them. And unfortunately for him, they all said Gerard Williams, Section 504 Compliance Officer. And much to my chagrin, he threw them all away, or he recycled them. And I said, that would be such a great opportunity to say, you are all responsible for accessibility, to have everyone think of yourselves as Gerard Williams, Section 504 Compliance Officer, because there is a limited amount that I can do as a sign language interpreter, as a coordinator of accommodations. I can provide sign language interpreters, I can provide CART, I can provide any number of accommodations, but unfortunately, if multiple people are speaking at the same time, there's nothing that I can do that will make the CART work for that, that will make the interpreters work for that. If you don't introduce yourself by name, I cannot guarantee you that every interpreter who ever works here is going to know your name and be able to share that with a deaf or hard of hearing participant. A couple years ago, there was some research from the UK that indicated, it was research on deaf people in the workplace in the UK, that largely what deaf people at work who are working with sign language interpreters get is a running monologue. A meeting with 7 or 8 people is simply going to look like one person talking to them. And it becomes a lot of work for someone to disentangle who is speaking, what is the tenor of that person's personality. And I would implore you to try to make some explicit efforts for us to make this the gold standard for accessibility. So also taking that mindset and thinking, rather than announcing yourself and speaking slowly and taking a pause being for the interpreters or for the CART writer, it is for your fellow members with disabilities. Because at the end of the day, I can hear the difference in the voices of who is speaking. It is not for me. It is for your fellow members, and out of respect for people with disabilities that we should do this. Your meetings really are an intricate machine, particularly once we get to some of the remote meetings that have a lot of different pieces. And like any machine, it needs maintenance, it needs to be taken care of, it needs to be monitored, it needs to be lubricated to make sure that it's working just as well as it possibly could. And so that may mean that sometimes members of the accommodations team, the 504 compliance team, whether it be me, Lindsay, or Amy, or in working with the facilitators for your working groups, may reach out to you with a request that you change the way you were doing things to improve the accessibility of your meetings. And I would implore you to really take those things to heart. We are not trying to make your life more difficult, although it does sometimes entail work on everyone's behalf to ensure that everyone is included in all of the meetings of the DAC. Specifically in this room, we have captioning, as I'm sure those of you who are sighted can see. We have assisted listening systems that are available and built into this room. But as I said earlier, those assistive listening systems will only work if you are speaking into the microphone. So for those of you who are using your voices, please be sure that you are close to the microphone, that your microphone is on. And if your microphone is not on or it is not nearby, then let's all take a moment and be patient to make sure that everyone has full access. We also are going to ask that everyone wait for the camera to be turned to them before they begin to speak. That way those people who are relying on the captioning have a nice picture of who is speaking. You can avoid having that running monologue, and they can see the captioning. Likewise, those people who are using American Sign Language can be identified and can be seen with all of the various sight lines that are going on in this room that can get rather complicated. With that said, I know that you all want to roll up your sleeves and get your elbows in it today, so I don't want to take up any more of your time. But of course, if anybody ever has any questions for me, perhaps now is not the time. I think we've managed to get behind schedule slightly, but I am here all day, so feel free to catch me during a break. Be happy to talk to anybody about any accessibility concerns you have or any questions I can answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So I want to welcome Barbara. And we want to introduce our team.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Barbara Espen. I work in the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau. As a Deputy Bureau Chief, I oversee the Office of Intergovernmental Affairs, which works primarily with state and local governments, and also the Office of Native Affairs and Policy, which works primarily with tribes, tribal organizations, and intertribal organizations. My work includes oversight of two non-federal advisory committees. In other words, they're not subject to FACA because they are made up of exclusively elected officials. And those are the Intergovernmental Advisory Committee and the Native Nations Communications Task Force. In addition, I'm here right now because I'm helping out with accessibility matters that are handled by the Disabilities Rights Office until a replacement can be found for Karen Pelt-Strauss, the former Deputy Bureau Chief who oversaw DRO for many years. And of course, it goes without saying that Karen is not really replaceable, but we will be finding somebody to perform her tasks here. The Commission established the Disability Advisory Committee in 2014, as you know, to get advice and recommendations on disabilities-related issues. And CGB welcomes and thanks all of you for volunteering to serve on the 2018 to 2020 third term of the DAC. So welcome back to all of you who have served in the past. And welcome to all of the organizations and representatives that are new to the DAC. We recognize that this is a significant investment of your time, energy, and expertise and expense to attend and participate in meetings of the DAC that are held here in Washington, D.C., and to participate in working groups between DAC meetings on the development and drafting of recommendations for the Commission. And these recommendations are valuable. The Commission has referenced them in several proceedings, and they inform the conversation on both the macro and micro level, and we thank you in advance. And I also thank the DAC designated federal officer, Will Schell, and the DAC's alternative DFO, Deborah Patkin, the rest of the Disabilities Rights Office, the interpreters, and others too numerous to mention for their efforts to support the work of the DAC. And now I would like to introduce the two co-chairs of the DAC, Brian Scarpelli and Isidore Nyongabo. Brian Scarpelli is Senior Policy Counsel at ACT, the App Association, where he works on a variety of legal and policy issues impacting mobile app development companies, including disabilities access, intellectual property, broadband access, competition, privacy, and cybersecurity. Quite a portfolio. Before joining ACT, Brian worked for the Telecommunications Industry Association, also spent time here at the FCC, District of Columbia Public Service Commission, and ADIS, the Alliance for Telecommunications Industry Solutions. Thank you, Brian, for your willingness to serve as one of the DAC co-chairs. And next, let me introduce Isidore Nyongabo. Isidore is the Director of Advocacy and Public Engagement for the National Black Deaf Advocates Association. Isidore has a background in international human rights law and advocacy, and would like to advance access to telecommunications nationally and internationally for people who are deaf, hard of hearing, deafblind, and people with other disabilities. So thank you, Isidore, for your willingness to serve as one of the DAC co-chairs. And again, thank you all, members of the DAC, and we look forward to receiving your recommendations. And now I'll hand it off to Brian and Isidore to say a few words. So Isidore, why don't you go first?
I will keep it brief, but I want you to imagine a man born in Burundi, the country Burundi, with no internet, no electricity, and now to find myself here in this country where I have access to not only electricity, wireless, internet, but also a wonderful opportunity to communicate as a deaf person. So I want to thank all of you who are involved with implementing the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, the FCC. I want to thank for all the work that you have done, the companies who have invested in TRS and the TRS fund to ensure that we can get closer and closer to equal access to telecommunications. I am truly honored to be here today and to serve on an international level here in this office, in this country, to help ensure that we can work together to create the best possible future for people who are deaf, hard of hearing, deaf-blind, blind, and people with every and any disability to ensure they have the best technology access that we can. Not only access to communication, but access to information. And success means getting to the finish. So I really do hope that by 2020, we will be wrapping up our term with a celebration of all of our various accomplishments, all of our recommendations that have been implemented because of successful innovation that results in policy. And we are here to help those who make policy and to make sure that the policy is in line with technological innovation, and I look forward to working with all of you towards that end. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, once again, I'm Brian Scarpelli, the other co-chair. I'm very pleased to be here. Just a little bit more information, if it would help, about my organization. We're a nonprofit trade association for small business software developers and high-tech companies located around the U.S. I just want to emphasize that the App Association has a very strong commitment to providing all users of information and communication technology, and I mean that in the broadest sense, with true accessibility. And that's why my organization is supportive of me being here in this role. For example, we have been working a great deal with our members to promote their their building in of the needs of those with disabilities into the earliest stages of the design of their software and hardware products, accessibility by design, in other words, and that's a big priority for us. That's just one example, but we're personally, I've between my time at the App Association, going back to, as you heard a little bit of my bio there, but with the Telecommunications Industry Association, working with the district government from kind of a state-like organization perspective, disability access has been a personal passion of mine. So I'm very excited to be working with you all in this role, and I look forward to collaborating with you all, and I would second the goals that Isidore just gave us all. I think those are very laudable. Thanks.
All right, it seems like we have managed to catch up on time, and now we have an opportunity to connect everybody's faces with their names here, so we're going to go around and ask for your name and the organization that you represent. Hi, good morning. Deborah Patkin. I'm the Deputy Designated Federal Officer. Hi, everyone. My name is Susie Rosen-Singleton. I am the Chief of the Disability Rights Office in the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau of the FCC. Welcome.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Elliot Greenwald, Deputy Chief of the Disability Rights Office here at the FCC.
Good morning. I'm Maggie Nygren. I'm the Executive Director of the American Association on Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities, AAIDD.
Good morning. I'm Tom Lidkowski, Vice President of Accessibility at Comcast.
Good morning. I'm Beth Nubby. I'm the Senior Vice President for Finance, Administration, and HR with the National Captioning Institute.
Hi, everyone. I'm Savannah Schaefer with the Telecom Industry Association. I manage our accessibility portfolio.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Michael Strecker, the Vice President of Regulatory and Strategic Policy with Clear Captions, and very happy to be here with you this morning.
Good morning. I'm Dixie Ziegler with Hamilton Relay. Good to see many of you today.
Good morning. I'm Shelley Blakeney. I'm with T-Mobile, and I work in the Federal Regulatory Affairs Department there.
And good morning, everybody. I'm Tony Stevens. I'm a technology advisor for the American Council of the Blind.
Good morning. I'm a Rehan Hassan, Senior Director of Technology and Standards with the Consumer Technology Association.
Good morning. My name is Townsend Davis. I'm an attorney with ABC Inc. and its parent company, the Walt Disney Company.
Good morning. This is Sam Yale with Level Access.
This is Gay Jones with the Federal Emergency Management Agency in the Office of External Affairs.
Good morning. I'm Tim Cregan. I'm a Senior Accessibility Specialist at the U.S. Access Board. Morning.
Good morning. I'm Lisa Hamlin. I'm the Director of Public Policy at Hearing Loss Association of America and a passionate user of all the technology the FCC has oversight of.
Buenos días, Maria Diaz, representing always the needs of the Latino population with disabilities. I'm here representing the CAPTA and the National Coalition for Latinx with Disabilities.
Good morning. I'm Pam Holmes, Executive Director of Consumer and Regulatory Affairs and Customer Service at Ultratech CAPTA.
Good morning, everybody. Gary Beam with the National Technical Institute of the Deaf. I'm the Vice President of Academic Affairs up at NTID, and I'm actually the alternate. Brian Traeger is the representative. He's a new member for this DAC 3, and so I'm here to support him. He couldn't be here today, and so I'm taking his place. Very nice to see all of you again. Good morning, everybody. I'm Brianne Berger. I'm with the U.S. Department of Education, the Office of Special Education Rehab Services, OSERS. I'm the Director Liaison to Special Institutions. Good morning. My name is Christian Vogler with Gallaudet University. I'm the Director of the Technology Access Program at Gallaudet. Good morning. This is Zainab Al-Kebsi. I'm with the National Association of the Deaf. I'm their policy counsel. And I'm Claude Stout. I'm the Executive Director of Telecommunications for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing, TDI. Hi, everybody. I'm Jeff Rosen. I'm with Convo, Communication VRS provider.
Hello, my name is Amita Srinivasan, and I'm the President of Deafblind Citizens in Action. I am honored to serve on the committee and will be bringing issues related to our deafblind community on the table here. A little about me, I'm a sophomore from the University of Texas at Austin, and I am majoring in psychology and human dimensions of organizations. Thank you. I look forward to working with you.
Good morning, everybody. Greg Leibach, or Gregory, but please call me Greg, representing CSD VRS and also ZVRS. I'm Chief Legal Officer. Oh, the camera's not on me yet, sorry. There we are. All right. So again, good morning, everybody. I'm Greg Leibach. You can see on my name placard, if you're cited, that I'm Gregory, but please call me Greg. I represent CSD VRS as well as ZVRS, and I am Chief Legal Officer for the company. I see some new faces. I think that's great. Get some new blood into the DAC. And if you don't know, I used to sit on the other side of the table. I was an FCC employee. And so I was where those folks are now. Good morning, everyone. I am a new member to the DAC. My name is Rebecca Rosenthal. I'm representing the National Association of State Relay Administrators, or NASRA. This is my first time being at a DAC. I'm very excited to be here, to be part of this group. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Dennis Selznick. I'm with Sprint, and I am an accessibility product manager.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Ian Dillner with Verizon. The name tag says Zach Bastian. He is the other Verizon member. I'm the alternate. Zach couldn't be here, but it's good to see everyone again. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sarah Malaire with the American Foundation for the Blind. I'm a public policy and research advisor, and I'm new to the DAC, but I'm happy to serve with all of you.
Hi, everyone. Maria Kirby, Senior Policy Counsel with Apple.
Linda Vanderloop, AT&T.
Hi, I'm Paul Schrader with AIRA, pronounced IRA. Was actually, I think, on the first DAC like 100 years ago. And glad to be back with this group. Not having served at the FCC, but similar to Greg, I have to remember that I actually wear an industry hat. It's a little uncomfortable sometimes, remembering that. But for years, I, of course, worked for the American Foundation for the Blind, but it's great to be here in my new capacity.
Hi,
Hi, everybody. Kara Graves with CTIA. I believe this is CTIA's third time around and my second, so thank you, and good to see everybody again. My son has been kicking me all morning, so I'm pretty sure he's happy to see everybody as well.
Stop that, son. Goodness. I'm Joel Snyder, SNYDER, long time, since 1981, worker with audio description, advocate for audio description. I'm the president of Audio Description Associates, LLC, and since 10 years ago, founded and still direct the Audio Description Project for the American Council of the Blind.
I'm Michael Maddox with Sorensen Communications, the provider of Sorensen Video Relay Service and Caption Call.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Brittany Winland, and I'm the alternate representative for VITAC. And Heather York will be with us hopefully here shortly. This is our first year on the main DAC, but we've worked with some of you on subcommittees before and excited to be here.
Hi, everyone. This is Will Schell, designated federal officer for the DAC.
And once again, this is Brian Scarpelli, one of your co-chairs. I think we've done the rounds, it appears, so.
Yeah, actually, can I?
Oh, sure.
Paul has hand up.
Okay. Call him. He's asking.
Oh, I see. We have a question from Paul. Go ahead, Paul.
Hi, Paul Schrader with IRA. I don't think we have time for alternates to introduce, but I wonder if they could at least raise their hands so we know who's here as alternates for DAC. Would that be possible?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. Yeah, and this is Will. I'm going to jump in very quickly. There is a public microphone up there, or the alternates can kind of just step forward to where their primaries are sitting and use their microphones. But we'll try to get to all of them. I think it's important to say hello to the alternates. Many of them are going to be on many of these committees and showing up to these things. It's really important. So.
You want a microphone?
Yes.
Microphone.
Good morning.
Good morning. I'm Daniel Fry. I am the alternate with Paul Schroeder from IRA. Thank you very much. Look forward to working with you.
Hello, good morning. I am Claudia Gordon with Sprint. Sprint Accessibility. I'm alternate to my colleague, Dennis Selznick.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm Bruce Bailey. I'm the alternate from the Access Board with my colleague Tim Cregan to my right.
I had to bring the microphone way down. I'm Susan Masbury. I'm the alternate for Linda Vanderloop at AT&T.
Hi, I'm Lee Foley, and I'm an alternate to an alternate, Larry Walk, with the National Association of Broadcasters. He is at our convention right now.
Hi, I'm Bruce Peterson. I work with Mike Maddox at Sorensen Holdings and work with Caption Call. It's great to be here. I know many of you, and it's great to be able to serve on the DAC.
Thanks. Tony, we see your card up there. Go ahead.
Hello, I'm Claire Stanley. I'm the alternate from the American Council of the Blind.
We are doing pretty good on time, so I think we're probably going to proceed to our break and then, oh, sorry, I got to wait for the camera. Yeah, so I think that we're going to proceed to our break, and we will come back at, wait, not 10:30, 10:45. Back at 10:45. Oh, I've got Tom's, we see Tom.
There you go.
Tom Litkowski with Comcast. Maybe this is coming up a little bit later, and I don't want to delay the break, but I was hoping that Will or someone from the FCC could provide a little bit more detail on the two working groups and the work that they're going to be covering.
Hi there. Hi, this is Will. Yeah, there's going to be a lot more detail. In particular, we're going to go into all of the detail of both working groups at the working group sessions, so that everyone can kind of get into all the questions and the nitty-gritty parts of all of that. So.
The follow-up there, though, is if you're on one group, you don't necessarily know or what the details of the other group are. So I just thought it would be good to just have a little bit more context of the types of recommendations that each group will be putting forward.
Right. Sorry, this is Will. Absolutely. So we will, at the working groups, where we have information about the other working group as well. Yeah.
I think we do have a question. Go ahead. Lisa. Oh, sorry.
Okay, so this is Lisa Hamelin. So for those of us who are not on either working group, it would be really nice to have what Tom was asking for, just for the general session to go over. I mean, you don't have to go in elaborate detail, but for us to get a real sense of what each working group will be looking at, so that we have a sense of, I mean, eventually they'll have a recommendation. It'd be nice to have a sense of what they're doing in advance.
Hi, this is Will. We'll see if we can fit it in, but otherwise we'll definitely get all of that information out. If it hasn't gone out, I apologize to the few who are not on a working group. We'll make sure that everyone gets that information if we can't work it in during the meeting.
Can I make a suggestion? I mean, if we run out of time at the main session, why not right before you break out after lunch? Maybe we could take a few minutes to sit together so that you could describe what's going on, and then I will leave. Sadly.
Yeah, that's. We'll take it under advisement. We'll manage the agenda. Thanks very much.
All right, let's go into our break, and I will see you all in about 17 minutes. All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Isidore here, co-chair of the DAC. And I think that we are going to, for the moment, skip Commissioner Stark's remarks. He's not quite here yet, so we're going to turn it over to Susie Rosen-Singleton, Chief of the Disability Rights Office, DRO, in CGB. Take it away. Good morning, everyone. I just wanted to add my congratulations for you on your third term of the DAC, the Disability Advisory Committee. Thank you so much for your willingness to serve here. And I may end up being interrupted by the arrival of Commissioner Starks. That's fine. It's no problem. When he does get here, please someone let me know. I'll be happy to pause for Commissioner Starks' remarks. Some of you may know that we typically provide updates, and I do that along with Elliot Greenwald, my Deputy Division Chief, about DRO's work since the previous meeting. But since today we do have some new faces around the table, what I'd like to do is start out sharing a more broad overview of what our office does so that we can all be on the same page. For some of you, you may know the song and dance, much as you knew Gerard's song and dance a little bit earlier about accommodations. But I do feel like it might be of value because I realize the breadth of our office's work is just so incredibly broad that I'd like to make sure that we talk a little bit about it. And we're going to go through a bird's eye view of DRO, and then towards the end I'll give you a few highlights of specific work that we have done. First of all, the Disability Rights Office deals with 3 major areas of accessibility at the Commission. The first is modern communications. The second is emergency communications, and the third is video programming. And sometimes there is some overlap between those categories, but those are the 3 major topics that we are under our purview. There are a lot of other federal agencies that we collaborate with as well on those topics. The Disability Rights section of the U.S. Department of Justice, for example, the U.S. Access Board, who's represented here, U.S. Department of Education also represented here, FEMA also represented here. So we really are here to serve you as public servants. And it's really important that you know how and who to reach out to. Now, there's never a wrong reason to reach out to the Disability Rights Office, but I am going to give you a list of some specific examples of things we work on in each of these 3 areas. First, modern communications. We deal with advanced communication services, or ACS, that has to do with non-interconnected and interconnected VoIP or VoIP, Voice over Internet Protocol. And I'll give you some examples of that. Gaming, as those of you around the table who may be gamers or who have kids who are gamers, in those situations where there's 2-way communication between 2 people, that is considered advanced communication services. Web chat, likewise, you will see that you can talk to an individual as long as there are 2 live humans involved and not machine-to-human communication. 2 humans communicating over text over the internet is considered under our purview as advanced communication services. Second issue under modern communications is direct video calling. We have encouraged video conferencing opportunities for people who are calling into a federal agency or a company using American Sign Language and their video phone. So that is something that and it's one of our FCC initiatives here that we are continuing to encourage the adoption of direct video calling. Third is hearing aid compatibility. We do not regulate hearing aids, however. That is the Federal Drug Administration, FDA, but the regulation that we do have is over telecommunications equipment and devices to ensure that they are hearing aid compatible. Fourth, the National Deafblind Equipment Distribution Program, or NDB-EDP. We have a $10 million annual program thanks to the 21st Century Video Communications and Video Accessibility Act, Cvaa, that allows us to distribute those equipment out of those $10 million to the 51 states and territories that participate in order to distribute equipment and devices, programs, services to low-income individuals who are deaf-blind, those who need those services in order to be able to connect to modern telecommunications technology. At this point, we're still struggling to find some of the best solutions to access telecommunications for people who are deaf-blind. Next issue is real-time text, RTT. I know some of you are very well versed in that attempt to transition from TTY to real-time text, given that RTT is the best solution for IP-based networks, and TTY is not compatible. It's an analog device. It's a legacy device. So we're trying to move away from TTY, although we still do require backwards compatibility for our real-time text. That is an area in which there's ongoing rulemaking. Relay services. And telecommunications relay services, we have some relay service providers represented here. We've got speech-to-speech relay, IP caption telephone service, video relay services. There's a whole host of relay services in telecommunications that exist and are under our purview. We also have tech transitions, as it is called. That can be transitions from TDM, or what is called copper lines, to IP or fiber lines. We want to ensure that in that transition, disability issues are not adversely impacted in the transition from some of these legacy systems to the more modern systems. So we're very, very involved in a lot of tech transitions proceedings as well. And the final issue under modern communications is the accessibility of telecommunications services and equipment. If you're thinking about, for example, enterprise phones, you'll see that some may not be accessible to people who are blind or visually impaired. So we have rules around that to ensure that you've got accessibility for all people with disabilities to their phones, whether it's a talking menu or other accessibility feature. The second main area, video programming, that I'll talk about, we have oversight over closed captioning on television and the internet. We oversee video description to make programming accessible to people who are blind or visually impaired. Display of closed captioning on equipment, that meaning the ability to change the font, the size, the background color, etc. That is under our purview, as well as considered 708 rules for video programming. Television and set-top box controls, menus, and program guides. We require that these user interfaces for such devices and the user experience is accessible. And that is also our obligation as well, to ensure that you can actually use your television and use your set-top box. And last, emergency information on television. Ensuring that information that is being conveyed in times of urgency and emergency on television is accessible. The third big area is emergency communication, direct communication with 911. We have rules surrounding that dovetail with U.S. Department of Justice under Title II of the ADA for direct communication to 911, which is required. We regulate the carriers. The Department of Justice has jurisdiction over the public safety answering points, or PSAPs, that is the 911 call centers. So between the two of us, we ensure that we've got text to 911, TTY calling to 911, that direct communication as required. We are also looking forward to next generation, or NG 911, some of these multimedia platforms that include video, data, text, voice, all in one platform. And that is something that we are very much looking forward to. How soon that will happen, I cannot say, but we're hoping to encourage some more accessibility opportunities there. There are alerting systems that we have oversight over, also the emergency alerting system, EAS, the wireless emergency alerts, or WEA, called WEA. And as I mentioned, there is some overlap between video programming and emergency communications, in that we monitor the requirements for accessible emergency information on television, as I previously stated. Okay, so that is really the umbrella of issues that DRO handles. But frankly, our number one, our key goal is to ensure that we engage with our stakeholders. Our rules cannot be effective without your engagement, your feedback. Each one of you has information for us about how our rules are working. Where are the gaps in our rules? What new ideas do you have that we could potentially implement in the future going forward? Because we are looking at a pace of technological evolution. We've got augmented reality, virtual reality, all of these things. We are looking to you to give us feedback. We are not under a charitable model here, but instead recognizing that we are all humans and we all deserve to have equal access to services and programs as Americans. With that in mind, we have several initiatives at DRO to allow for meaningful input from you. Number one, of course, you're all here at the deck. We have this mechanism to bring your recommendations, your experience, your expertise in the field to our attention so that we can roll it into our processes here and implement best practices for accessibility. We also have a complaints system at the Commission, and that complaint system is for anyone to use. We are working on increasing its mobile friendliness. We also have a deputy chief who focuses specifically on our complaints process and ensuring that that process is consumer friendly. So I want to give a shout out to Theodore Marcus, who is that deputy chief. I believe that he is here, although I'm looking for him in the room. Sorry, I guess I missed him, but he has been overseeing this complaints process to ensure that the complaints system is really receptive to any of your concerns, and to reassure you that if you have any accessibility issues, that we are working in your best interests. He works closely with the complaints team, which consists of investigators, and all of the subject matter experts in DRO to develop solutions, collaborative solutions, and we do work with other bureaus as well, like public safety, like the media bureau at the Commission, and so forth. Depending on what that topic is, we want to ensure that our complaint system is working for us and for you. You can reach that at fcc.gov/complaints. We welcome your feedback on that. We also have our email, dro@fcc.gov. Please do reach out to us anytime. I also want to highlight another way that we engage with the public, which is our flagship program that we're very proud to say we were the first in the federal government to implement such a program. That is the American Sign Language Customer Support Line. April Jackson handles the calls. April is here, you can see here. So this is our shout out to you, April, for all the work that you do. Thank you so much, April. April also does help with creating our Asl Video Library, which is another way that we try to engage with consumers to provide access to our resources in consumer-friendly formats and in a manner that is friendly for small businesses. We have small business compliance guides. We have consumer guides and guides in ASL as well. Some of our other stakeholder engagement initiatives here I'll list for you. The Chairman's Awards for Advancements in Accessibility. That is an event that we have annually to promote innovators in the field, to introduce products over the course of the previous year, to promote accessibility of their products or functions or features. We see some people in this room who have been previous winners of that Chairman's AAA, as it is called, and I hope that many more of you are going to be submitting nominations for that award in future. That's going to be going on June 18th at 4:45 p.m. That is another mechanism for us to encourage more engagement, to shed a light on the need for accessibility to be baked in from the outset in a lot of these development opportunities. We also have a listserv, accessinfo@fcc.gov. You can subscribe to receive our latest news and updates on DRO or any disability-related items or events and activities at the Commission. That is distributed if you send an email to accessinfo@fcc.gov and just say you'd like to subscribe, then we can add you to that distribution list. Couple more things. We have Ecfs, that is the Electronic Comment Filing System. I'm sure many of you are very well versed in that, but for those of you who are watching perhaps online, I'll share the URL. It's fcc.gov, www.fcc.gov/Ecfs. That is where you can submit your comments about our rulemaking proceedings. And we really do value all of your input. We read them all, and we really try to be responsive to them all and consider them all. So please do file your comments. The final thing that I'd like to mention is that we also have a whole host of events that we put together, roundtables and forums. We have one coming up soon on May 10th that has to do with electronic newsroom technique, which is a method for captioning live news programming. And it is making use of the teleprompter that already exists for those states, or excuse me, cities that are not considered the top 25 and thus required to use real-time captioning, which is a large proportion of those stations. So we are looking at those cities that are using ENT and examining that practice. May 10th, please join us online or be here. It is open to the public. Now, as I promised, I would still share with you a few highlights, and I can turn it over to Elliot to talk to you about a couple of these TRS matters as well. Those of you who are in this room last October 3rd are aware that we had the nationwide test for the emergency alerting system and the wireless emergency alerts, and you may have seen how accessible those tests are and ways in which they are not accessible. We received many comments from some of you in this room as well. That final report was released on Monday, outlining what our next steps should be for improving the accessibility of EAS and WIA, as well as other issues surrounding the distribution of those tests. So thank you all for your time and input, those of you who submitted to us and for engaging with us to get the best possible information together for that report. Second is the Cvaa Biennial report to Congress that was submitted in October as well. We are required by law, the 21st Century Communications and Video Accessibility Act, to submit to Congress biennially a report that identifies industry's compliance with the Cvaa, internet browsers on mobile phones, telecommunications equipment and devices, advanced communication services, and to identify what are the accessibility barriers that remain. And we have submitted that report in October. Again, many of your comments did make it into that report as well, so I thank you again for that. Please do keep us posted about any ongoing accessibility barriers so that we can be sure to report on those. The next highlight is on hearing aid compatibility. We adopted rules November 15th of 2018 to require wireless carriers to have additional reporting obligations on their websites about what phones they have available, phones and devices that they have available that are hearing aid compatible. I know Michael Karowitz already mentioned this to you this morning, but another highlight is the video description marketplace report to Congress that is due in October. We welcome your comments by May 1st, so please do submit your comments if you have not yet done so. With that said, I will turn it over to Elliot, but before I do that, I want to give Elliot a shout out as well for all his leadership on TRS items. Thank you so much, Elliot, for all the work that you do.
Okay. Thank you, Susie. I just have a couple of items to mention rather than give the more extensive report that I've given in past meetings of this type. On February 14th, the Commission adopted an item on Internet Protocol Caption Telephone Service, IPCTS, to address several matters to better ensure program management and prevent waste, fraud, and abuse. And among other things, the Commission decided to bring the registration data for IPCTS into the TRS user registration database, which is a centralized system of user registration records currently used for VRS. In addition, to speed the processing of Caption 911 calls, the Commission proposes to simplify the rules for handling 911 calls, and I'll just step back 1 second and explain that for equipment-based IPCTS, where there's an underlying telecommunications provider, that underlying telecommunications provider that the user has a subscription to, either a telephone or VoIP provider, is responsible for delivering the call to 911 call centers. But for web-based as well as mobile-based IPCTS, where the IPCTS provider is also providing the telecommunications equipment, connection. Under those circumstances, the further notice will simplify the rules by streamlining the proposals to streamline the information that must be provided to the 911 call center, to cut out some of the information that we've learned the 911 call centers do not want and do not need, and therefore that speeds the call itself. And the Commission also at the same time gave a temporary waiver to the IPCTS providers while this rulemaking is pending. And then the second item, for those who've not heard, yesterday the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau released an item suspending for 1 year what's called the Relay User Equipment Profile, which is one of the VRS interoperability standards adopted by the Commission in the January 2017 interoperability order. The other standards are all in effect, and the Commission suspended the compliance deadline for the RU profile, as we call it, for 1 year to give the Commission a chance to further study the matter. I guess any questions for Susie or me, this would be a good time to ask.
Hi. Yes. Hi. Thank you very much. Jeff, please go ahead.
Thank you. This is Jeff Rosen. I want to thank the FCC for your leadership. Did you want to say something? Oh, thank you. This is Jeff. I want to thank the FCC for your leadership in providing all of these successes that we've had. I understand that it is a very challenging environment. So to see all of these actions that you are taking nowadays for people with disabilities, I deeply appreciate that, and I just wanted to bring to your attention. I feel a little bit of a responsibility because there are some new faces here. And for the deafblind consumers, I'm sure that you guys are all aware of concerns from the deafblind community about the National Deafblind Equipment Distribution Program. I understand that you have been working very specifically. There are specific parameters that you are working within for the telecommunications accessible equipment, and the eligibility for that equipment has to be at a certain level, a certain income level to be able to get that equipment. I understand, although that I am not deafblind, I do understand that there are some concerns about the accessibility because of some of the requirements to get the equipment. These are very expensive pieces of equipment that many people who provide the evaluations and counseling are not very familiar with deafblind, and they are more familiar with blind issues, but not specifically with deafblind issues. So that is another issue that's coming up often in the discussion. Also, with the deafblind equipment distribution program, they rely on Braille because the FCC does not handle the point-to-point communications. I understand that deafblind individuals using Braille, it is a smaller minority of people using that service. I know that the FCC does a lot of work on, hasn't done a lot of work on deafblind issues so far, and that's not my issue, not my concern. However, I do think that this program needs to be revisited to understand better some of the challenges in how to report to Congress, to explain what works. And it is a good program, but there are some large gaps causing the deafblind community to be left behind. Whether or not they are Braille users or how they communicate point to point through relay. Currently, the law prohibits any VRS to VRS call, but many people are wanting that for their point-to-point calls. So that is something that I would like to throw out on the table. And thank you again for your wonderful list of things you are working on. I strongly support moving on these issues.
All right, Susie. Thank you for your comments, Jeff. This is Susie speaking. The National Deafblind Equipment Distribution Program is relatively new. It was only recently converted to a permanent program, quite recently, in fact. And we welcome any feedback, and I will make sure to document your comments there. We do get complaints about any and all of our potential topics that are under our purview, so we always are very encouraging that complaints should be filed with us. Please do, and with specific information. So to the extent that anybody hears anything, please do reach out to us directly with specifics, and we can investigate each and every one of them case by case. And we have done and will continue to do that. In terms of the eligibility requirements for that program, we did review that issue when we released the last report and order. I believe currently it's 400% of the poverty guidelines, which is, what a lot of people thought was fairly generous at that time. We're getting feedback that that is not working. Then we will have to take that back and review that again. But for now, the third issue that you identified about Braille, we continuously encourage these state and local agencies to upgrade their library of equipment, if you will, what is available. So if they have equipment that may be able to be responsive to those who do or do not use Braille, we want the equipment to match the needs of the person. We are not locked in the program level to any particular equipment or particular resource because each person's individual needs vary. And so the evaluators, if they're reporting that evaluators are not qualified, we need to know that, and that will be taken very seriously. So thank you so much, and I look forward to getting more specifics on that.
Go ahead, Zainab. Sure.
Thank you. This is Zainab speaking. My question is to Susie. So, for example, you were mentioning about your work on the ASL library. I want to commend you on that. However, the accessibility of those videos may be very beneficial to a lot of consumers, but I understand that things happen that are impacting to me. Okay, sorry, I'm just going to start over.
Let me commend you on the implementation of the ASL library. I think that is a wonderful improvement in terms of accessibility. But related to that, I'm a subscriber to the Access Info Listserv. And I'm always telling people to sign up for it because I think it's a wonderful avenue for people to find out what orders are happening, what NPRMs are out there vis-a-vis the FCC, and that will impact their consumers' lives, especially consumers with disabilities. But that email goes out without any ASL videos attached to it. So that information is not as accessible as it could be to a subset of the consumers who will not be able to understand it. I'm wondering if there's any plan to begin sending out ASL versions of the Access Info Listserv.
Hi, this is Susie. Thank you for that very interesting idea, Zainab. I have to admit that that is the first time that that idea has surfaced of having a parallel resource there. Our Access Info emails are actually released ideally on the day that an item is also being released, so timing could be a challenge for us, but we can certainly look into that. That may be something that we could look at implementing. It would be great if people, I do want to emphasize that if there are people who need access to information in ASL, they can call the ASL customer support line. That is at the bottom of any and all access info announcements. So if you need access to information in ASL, you can certainly give us a call and we can explain any information in ASL. Of course, we are not ignoring your idea, but I can say that currently we do have access to the ASL customer support line in the interim. So we do want to make sure that those consumers have access to that information. It would be an interesting challenge to have a parallel resource released in American Sign Language for every one of those announcements, but we will look into it. And thank you. That is the type of feedback that we need to hear, and new ideas are always welcome. Very, very innovative. Thank you.
Thank you, Claude. Go ahead.
Thank you. I have a question for Susie. Your I Can Connect program, the formal name for the National Deafblind Equipment Distribution Program. I have a question to ask of all of the consumer benefits for those consumers who use Braille. Is it asked if that is a benefit, if they use Braille?
This is Susie speaking. I would have to double check, but I am almost positive that it is, because the total evaluation will ask that question, whether you're a Braille user or not, in terms of the individual assessments. So I'm getting some head nods from folks who work in DRO that that question is asked, yes. And we have follow-up?
It's not a follow-up specifically, but I just wanted to add that it's something to look into, because it'd be interesting to know the statistics of who uses Braille and who does not, and what states, so that the federal programs can parallel the products and services. And if there is a specific percentage number of Braille users, we want to make sure that there are services that are equal to that, so that there is no discrimination happening there. But thank you.
Good, thank you.
Thank you. Amita, I believe, is next with a question. You raise your tent card.
Hi. The deafblind
wait a moment. Sorry.
Sorry.
For the camera.
Hi. This is Amita Srinivasan speaking. The deafblind community does face many issues with regard to equipment distribution and VRS calls. So it is great to hear that the FCC is open to hearing our concerns. So thank you to Jeff for bringing that up, and thank you for your response, Susie.
Zizidor, speaking again. Thank you so much, Susie and Elliot, for that comprehensive information. It's really important information for us to know before we begin our work at the DAC, to clarify all those objectives so that we can deliver and provide some results. So it's a good discussion. Now, I think that we will be introducing Paula Silberthau. And she is an attorney advisor at the Office of General Counsel. She will be talking about an overview of the Federal Advisory Committee Act.
I'm going to hit on some of the highlights of the legal framework for the advisory committees, not because I'm saying what I'm saying is even half as important as what you folks have been saying at this meeting, but because I'm just trying to give you some principles and overview to keep you on track. So at the end of the day, when you make recommendations, these recommendations can be used without any challenges by the commission. So that is the goal, to keep things on track so that your recommendations can move forward and there are no lawsuits or anything silly like that. The Advisory Committee Act is codified in 5 U.S. Code, Appendix 2, and it governs the operations of most advisory committees in the federal government unless the committees are otherwise exempted by statute. So in your case, the Federal Advisory Committee Act applies to your procedures. And as most of you probably know already, there are a couple of guiding principles under the VACA, and these are openness in government, diversity and balance in the membership of the group here, as well as a balanced membership on your working groups, and public accountability. And to make some of that stuff happen, there are always timely notices of meetings. The law requires there be 15 days notice in the Federal Register. And because the FCC, like most agencies, recognizes that not every group or person reads the Federal Register on a daily basis, we try to post our committee meetings on our website, on the website if you have one for your advisory committee, and just generally through other media so everyone knows what is happening, not just your members, but people who might want to attend from the public. The FACA requires that the full committee meetings, such as this one, be open to all interested people. People who are not members can sometimes address the committee. That lies in the discretion of the commission, and it depends a lot upon what you have to cover and get through, and a lot of times there is just no time left at the end of the day for public comments. But if there are, and if that's something that the agency wants, you can take public comments. I'd mentioned that under very limited circumstances, parts of meetings can be closed, and this has to be done in advance. And I don't think that would pertain as much to the topics you folks would be addressing. But if, for example, you had someone reporting on something that was under a special patent or being developed or secret about accessibility equipment, for example, and you felt that you could have a better discussion having the meeting closed because you don't want to, intrude upon privileged materials. If something like that comes up, let Will, as your DFO, know, and he would bring it to our attention because it takes going through the General Counsel's office, getting a sign-off by the General Counsel, by the chairman of the agency, et cetera. Usually this sort of thing comes up with national security matters, but every now and then this does happen in a way that affects our advisory committees. Under FACA, all of the documents of the parent advisory committee that are submitted, such as your working agenda, your recommendations, your reports, the transcript that's required for each meeting. All of these documents are maintained in a place where anyone is allowed to review them, including you, of course, and any members of the public. This would be done primarily by getting in contact with Will, and arrangements would be made for inspection, copying, whatever. And again, if something that you're submitting is for any reason considered confidential, let Will know that in advance, and anything you'd be submitting that you feel is confidential or privileged, there's a procedure in the FCC rules for protecting that information, but the procedure needs to be followed. It's actually section .459 of our rules, and it takes you through the steps of how you mark the papers to make sure that you request that it be privileged. But again, if that should happen, get in touch with Will. He'll probably call me up, and then we'll walk you through that at the time. As far as documents, one important thing that's not always followed, but needs to be, for the working groups, all communications between working group members, whether they're about procedural things like when you have your meetings, or whether they are draft reports that you're working on, comments on drafts, information that you're sharing with each other to come up with recommendations. Will, as the DFO, needs to be copied on all those communications, because it's part of the agency's work, and it should be maintained and potentially available for a FOIA. We do not always treat every document of a working group as being a part of the formal documents of the full FACA, but we do need to maintain copies. And also, under the GSA guidelines, if our DFO isn't copied, then he may not know what is going on, and he is supposed to hear, or a liaison should be attending all the meetings. So if you're setting up a meeting date for your working group and you forget to include someone from the FCC, not only is that a record-keeping problem, but it's a process problem, because then the DFO isn't kept in the loop on, when the meetings are. So that's important, and it's not always honored, but it really is important to have that done properly. As far as the roles of the people who are active in this group, the committee and vice chair are sort of the focal point for you as committee members, as well as the DFO. And usually the committee chair and vice chair set up and conduct all of the meetings, and also work with the DFOs in suggesting meeting agendas. But in terms of the most important focal point, that would be Will as the DFO, and questions about anything can be funneled through him. So let me get to one actually really important thing, which is your working groups and what they can do, what working groups are supposed to do, and what they can't do. So working groups are often, did we lose this? Are we on? Okay. So working groups are really critical, because that's where a lot of the recommendations that go to your meetings come from. And unlike the full committees, which have to be conducted in public, working groups can be done in private. They can be more informal, and therefore you don't need 15 days notice. If you folks need to have an emergency working group meeting and can arrange it, you could do it in 24 hours. It gives you there are no advance notice requirements other than you have to make sure that all your members know about it and can attend. And the goal of the reason that the working groups are considered sort of different than the parent advisory group is that the working groups are for informal information gathering, drafting reports, discussing preliminary findings, coming up with novel ideas or just good ideas. And so therefore they can be conducted with some informality. Often people just do the working groups on the phone, video conferencing, whatever is most convenient to the group. However, it's important to understand that and this is an important legal concern, that the product that comes out of the working group cannot be sent directly to the commissioners or to the agency staff, or have anything else done with it other than moving it along to the entire DAC for review, discussion, and voting. Because if there were, and this has happened by mistake sometimes, if by mistake the working group thought its report was the final answer and just filed it directly with the commission or sent it to all the commissioners, as you can see, in that case, what would be happening is that the working group would be acting like the advisory committee. And what's the problem with that? The working group has been meeting in private. It hasn't been following all of the rules of the advisory committee. That's why it could meet in private. The working group is sort of a stepping stone. But if the working group starts moving forward its reports directly, skipping all of you as the full advisory committee, then you would have the working group being a de facto full committee, and it would be in violation of the Advisory Committee Act. And the commission wouldn't be able to rely on any of the recommendations of the working group. So there's an easy way to avoid it. Just remember, it's a working group, it's preliminary reports, it's preliminary advice, and everything that's important from the working group then just moves along for a vote to the parent group. Another thing that's come up from time to time is whether working groups can conduct surveys. And while that on its face sometimes sounds like a good idea, it really isn't. And the reason is that because the working group is sort of an arm of the FCC, it is, any surveys would be subject to the requirements of the Paperwork Reduction Act, which I try to avoid as much as possible. But the problem with that is that you have to jump through hoops and get permission, I believe, from OMB. This is way out of my area of expertise. So working groups really shouldn't be doing surveys. If there were something that you felt was really important to get information on, you could talk to Will. It is possible, if the staff agreed, that the agency could do a survey, although because of having to go through the steps of the Paperwork Reduction Act, that could take a while to get, permission. But if there's something along those lines that you think is really important, obviously you can get in touch with Will on it, or the chairman of your committee, and there can be a discussion of how to handle that. But please don't, shouldn't go out and just do major surveys. And in part, the other reason for that is you folks are the people with a lot of knowledge, and it's a large group. So, amongst yourself, you can share your experiences and provide information. So you probably would never reach a point where you actually needed a survey. Another detail is that, and this, we're often asked about this as people get into their work, do the ex parte rules apply? Every time you talk to someone who's involved in an NPRM at this agency, does that, or if staff appears before a working group and you give your input into that, does that mean you have to file an ex parte? I don't know whether we've done it yet, but typically what we do is do a public notice and sort of exempt everyone in this room and the operations of the working groups from the ex parte rules. And what our notice then says is that before the agency will rely on any oral reports that you may have given to agency staff or to commissioners, we will put that communication, staff will put that communication on the record of the proceeding in lieu of you're going through the ex parte requirements. So that just makes life a little bit easier. I've heard that someone also asked about whether you can have outside experts appear at working groups, and that is fine. You should clear that, in advance with Will, give them a heads up, but there's no constraint on having outside people come in, but there are sort of procedures to be followed. So the expert would come in, would give a presentation, people could ask questions, but at the point that you might move on to a new topic, if you have two topics, the expert on topic one would need to leave because, that person's work was done and shouldn't be staying during the rest of the meeting, since typically the working group meetings are closed. So that's how it works. And also, obviously, if you have a vote on something that the expert has just talked about, the expert is not a member of the working group and should just, nicely step out of the room at that point. And the final thing I'll mention is that, and this has come up occasionally, sometimes individual members get asked to talk to newspapers or, talk to their own groups, give a lecture on the work, things that touch on the work of the advisory committee, and that's fine for everyone to give their own individual views. What's important, though, is to not, by mistake really, pass off your individual view as the formal view of either the working group or the full committee if something hasn't been voted on. So if there's something that's hotly contested and there are 3 different perspectives and you're writing an article for opinion section for a newspaper about that issue, it's fine that you can do that and make it, your view or the view of your organization, but not sign the opinion piece in such a way as though it looks as though it's the formal voted view of the full committee. And that just happens sometimes because people write their name, their organization, and they say, member of the DAC. And then when someone's reading that, they think, oh, this is what the DAC has decided, and it may be or it may not be. But so if you can make those distinctions when you're giving the presentation or writing the letter to the editor, that's very helpful. Twice since I've been here the last couple of years, it hasn't been clear enough, and it was a hotly contested issue, and people then had to go back to the paper and write retractions. So, yeah, you don't want to do that. And I think that's about it. And I'd be happy to answer any questions about procedures if people have them. Okay.
Thank you so much, Paula, for that summary. It looks like we have no questions in the room. So with that, we will move to public participation. Do we have any members of the public here? If so, there is a microphone in the center aisle in the back. Okay, so far I see none. I'll just ask again if there's anyone here who would like to speak. Will?
Hi, this is Will. Let me take a moment and see if there's any public participation online. See if anyone has sent in any information, and I'll make sure to share that before the meeting is over. But so far, I don't have any public participation from the email account.
Okay. Great. We'd like to welcome Commissioner Jeffrey Starks.
Hello, everyone. Do I need to use this thing, or can folks hear me?
Oh, no, we need to use it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, good morning. I understand I was supposed to talk to you guys at the start of the day, but I think I'm reaching you guys now almost at the end of the day. So I hope that you've had a good day, a good session, and it really is an honor to be with you guys as you have fulfilled your day here. And this is an area, I'm obviously the new commissioner here. I've been seated now for about 2.5 months. And so a lot of these issues are new to me. The issues that you guys were working through here today are issues that I'm very interested in and are also new to me. But I know well that one of the pillars on which this commission itself is founded is ensuring that persons with disabilities are fully enabled by the nation's communication networks, services, and equipment. And undoubtedly thankful to have access to the DAC, to the judgment, the collaboration and wise counsel of all the persons who have served previously and, of course, now serve on this committee. And it's one thing to have a mandate, but it's an entirely different thing to know how best to use it. And so, so glad that you were able to make sure that we know the better way. Pleased to see a nice mix of stakeholders here today, is my understanding. Industry folks, disability advocacy organizations, and folks who each from their own perspective know how important it is for the Commission to get our policy right in this area. It is integral. And the issues of access for persons with disabilities in today's communications marketplace are great, but there are more opportunities to improve. And so thank you for coming, participating in this convening, and sustained such positive and steady progress. And I'm told that the previous 2 terms produced 28 recommendations for the FCC. That is fantastic work, and no doubt these recommendations have had a direct impact on our formulation of accessibility rules and policies, and hopefully we'll hear from what you've been able to achieve here today. The citations to the DAC recommendations are found throughout the Commission's most consequential accessibility documents. And I should know because it's my day job to work through all of these documents here. And so again, thank you so much for the day. Eager and anticipate the committee's work, and knowing that your output with respect to relay services and video described programming will give us an excellent material for consideration. And I am just truly so glad to see all of you here today, and eager to digest what you guys have been able to give us guidance and instruction on here today. So, thank you.
Will you take questions?
Sure.
All right, thanks. And we'll turn over to Paul Schrader.
Hi, Paul Schrader with Paul Schrader with IRA. Commissioner, thank you. Welcome. Welcome to the FCC. We're looking forward to working with you. Thank you for referencing what DAC does. We actually know what we do, but we'd love to know what you do. Maybe if you could talk a little, I know what you do at the Commission, but could you talk a little bit about background, any experience that you have with disability that you bring to this job? And also, each of your colleagues tends to sort of scope out areas that they work on. Commissioner Carr's done a lot on health issues, as you know. Commissioner Rosenworcel came to us with a lot of experience in Cvaa because she helped negotiate it. What kind of background do you bring, and what kind of issue do you want to focus on?
It's a great question. It is something that I'm thinking through right now. The good news is, being the new guy, that I have a little bit of time and a little bit of a lane to figure out where I'm going to spend a lot of my time. What I do a lot, I have found, is to take a lot of meetings. I sit in a lot of meetings, and then of course every month there is the Commission's work that I focus on, and making sure that I bring my best judgment to the issues that the chairman has set forth, and making sure that I add my perspective and my voice. And so, in particular, these issues are ones that I am going to need to get up to speed on. And so I'll look forward to, like I said, hearing what you guys have developed, what guidance and thoughts you were able to share. And I will look forward to coming back and seeing you guys next time.
And I would just follow up Paul Schrader with IRA again and note that Commissioner Clyburn, who you sort of succeed, I guess, was probably, in my experience, the strongest advocate for disability access and consumer access issues that I've since had the pleasure to work with, perhaps going back to Chairman Kennard's day. Certainly Chairman Wheeler, I suppose, also should make sure I reference. So you've got some shoes to fill, and I hope you will do a fine job and come back to this group on many occasions to learn very specifically the kinds of work that we're doing, and certainly welcome maybe delegations from the disability community to your office. I hope that's an outreach that you're doing or are welcoming.
Good deal. Thanks, Paul. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Did we find out if we have any live questions, Will? Okay. Great, thank you. Okay, it is about time for us to wrap up our first meeting. Oh, okay, Paul? Go ahead.
Paul Schrader with IRA. Making a pest of myself this morning. Sorry about that. I think I understood it, but I wonder if the co-chairs might want to comment on what's the best process for us to bring issues forward besides the working group. If, for example, we want to get engaged on some of the other topics of the FCC. For example, I don't remember, I may have missed it in the extensive bullets that Will sent out, but I don't remember health, for example, which has become quite an issue up here, of mobile health and e-health connectivity being an issue, and it's one that we may want to make some statements about. And if it's in there, I apologize. But what's the best way for us to sort of work to start formulating issues and maybe pushing work group development if that's something we need to do? And if you talked about it extensively and I was clueless, sorry about that.
Hi, this is Will. No, you're right. There hasn't been a lot of discussion about how that can happen. I think one thing to really keep in mind is that the issues that we're asking the DAC to work on are specifically the issues that the FCC needs assistance on. So I don't want to say that there is no opportunity for the people in this room to provide really good information and ideas about the next possible topics to work on. But so you bring them, I'd say email is the best way to do it. In the working groups are a good way to do it. And all of those will be brought to the attention of the FCC in order to kind of help pick and choose what the next issues are that they need assistance with.
Okay, any further questions or comments before we move to adjourn? Okay. The next meeting of the DAC will be Tuesday, September 24th. Please mark that one down in your calendars. We will all be back together on Tuesday, September 24th. Will or Brian, any closing comments?
I do. Hi, this is Will. I have a couple of things to say, and then I'll let Brian kind of close us out. So when this meeting is officially over, when Brian and Isidore say it's officially over, there's going to be some more activities that I'm going to want to try to coordinate. So please don't run away. When the meeting's over, then we're going to have lunch. We're going to do pictures, things like that. So just remain. We'll finish the meeting, and then we'll do some of the shuffling of the tables around or whatever we have to do to make those things happen. So don't run away quite yet.
Well, this is Brian Scarpelli speaking. I'm standing between us and lunch, so I'll be super brief, but just did want to say thank you all for being here today and for being a part of the DAC. Look forward to working with you all and appreciate it very much.